Hi guys, and welcome back to another installment of Secret Graceland number 45. I know it has been a minute since I've uploaded and I appreciate your patience. Before I even knew it, 6 or 7 months have gone by since I've uploaded a video, so I appreciate you guys tuning in. Those of you who have been here the entire journey. I'm a little rusty at doing this, so bear with me. A lot of these might seem familiar. This is a compilation of everything from the 1980s, encapsulating all the fun facts that I could think of, but there's a few new nuggets in there too. If you've kept up with my Then and Now series from the 1950s forward, the title might have thrown you off. Obviously, Elvis passed away in 1977, but in the 1980s, Graceland Mansion transformed from home to museum. If you haven't yet seen the Then and Nows made on the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, check those out. Today, we will be looking at some photos of Graceland taken in the 1980s and then that spot today. So let's jump in. So in June 1982, Graceland opened its doors to the public where they could pay $5 for adults, $3 for kids to go inside. Here's a flyer from back then offering a guided tour of the main floor and basement, trophy room, and gravesite. In the beginning, there was no car museum yet, and the airplanes weren't yet across the street. Here's what the front of the gates looked like in 1979 on an old postcard. Then a bit later in the early 80s in a photo shared by David Rixon. The sign says, "No pedestrians or automobile traffic on the grounds after 8:30 a.m. Please do not enter." Now here is that same view of the gates in 2023. In another photo from David Rixon's collection, here is a view taken from the gates looking across the street around 1982. A police officer directs traffic in front of the old shopping plaza, which was largely kept as the museum grew to take up the space there. The building on the right, called Souvenirs of Elvis, later became the Airplane Museum entrance. There it is straight ahead. Now here is that same view from the gates. The new complex opened in 2017. Let's go up the driveway and see some changes. While the grounds are the same as they've always been, take a look at the view from across the street from the house in David Rixon's photo from 1982. Unfortunately, there's nothing newer, so this was the view in 2014 of the old complex. Today, there's a lot more greenery across the street before the new complex begins. We're going in order of the tour path, not chronologically. So in 1987, in a celebration of Elvis's life 10 years after his passing, some of his contemporaries were photographed at Graceland. We'll see more as we go along. Walking up the driveway, here is 1950s blue suede shoes icon Carl Perkins rocking out. Walking a bit further up the path are a couple of shots of Rolling Stone guitarist Ron Wood taken by Harry Benson. He's just hanging around the pink Cadillac as fans continue to tour the house. Now here is that area today. Almost exactly the same, just without the AC unit from the upstairs window. In 1981, the film This Is Elvis was filmed inside Graceland. At that time, the house still looked like it did in the 1970s, totally red everything. Here is a still from the movie looking towards the front door. This is before fans were let inside, and everything was likely as it was when Elvis last saw it. Fast forward 6 years to 1987, the house is now a museum. Here's Priscilla for People magazine at the 10th anniversary of his passing. Now here is the front door today. Another of Priscilla on the stairs. Notice anything different? Lisa Marie's baby picture was at the foot of the stairs back in 1987 and would be until the early 90s. And here is the staircase today, how we recognize it with Elvis's portrait. Just these front rooms were brought back to how Gladys liked it originally and how it was for 17 out of the 20 years that Elvis lived in the house. Here are a couple of fun ones of Priscilla posed at the landing of the stairs, letting us get a look at what's up there, just in front of the locked door, of course. Similar to today, here is the view from the top of the landing more recently. Back down to the living room. We'll look at more of 1987. Priscilla sits in the middle of the famous 15-foot couch. Then a rare one of Elvis's buddy Roy Orbison relaxing on it. Then he lies down on the floor here, all with no shoes on. Now here is that entire space today. That People magazine spread wasn't just about celebrity contemporaries. It also included people that spent time with Elvis day in and day out. Here are Nancy Rooks, Pauline Nicholson, and Lottie Tyson, Elvis's real cooks and housekeepers, having fun together in the music room. Looking further into the room back then, here is what you can get a glimpse of on a tour. Some things have been swapped out, and today it's much more light and bright. 3 medias I want to mention if you would like to see a more in-depth of Graceland in the 1980s. Priscilla gives an amazing tour of the house and grounds in 1984, telling stories about Elvis along the way. It's called Elvis Presley's Graceland with Priscilla Presley. It's even on YouTube. In the early 80s, famous Memphis photographer 𝐕𝐢𝐝𝐸 took stunning pictures within the rooms, giving fans a crystal clear look. I often use his photos in my Secret Graceland videos for reference, and you can easily Google them. Lastly, in 1988, the band U2 visited Graceland while on break during their Rattle and Hum tour. They filmed their tour exploring the house, and though it's in black and white, it's fun to see what a tour back then would look like. This was back when there were human tour guides and the kitchen was off limits. Down the hall to Elvis's parents' original bedroom, which became Grandma Minnie Mae's in the late 1960s, and where she died in 1980, Lisa Marie visits with her great-grandma and Aunt Delta, Vernon Presley's sister. Notice the light switch behind them and the open door in the background? They are all posing in the room right here. This cute one from the same day and featured in Priscilla's book, Elvis and Me. Lisa Marie and her mom are seated in an armchair in front of the window. They are sitting right here. Now let's go back out to the dining room and have a look at this space in 1981. Here are a couple of stills from the film This Is Elvis. Here's the lesser quality but color photo of this space, as well as a black and white one that shows the detail of all of the items in this room. Now here is singer Brenda Lee posed looking out of the window of the dining room for People magazine in 1987. And that entire space today. In the early days of the museum, fans got to see things that we don't get to see on the tour today, like this cabinet in a photo by 𝐕𝐢𝐝𝐸. These days it's not there at all. As well as human tour guides, which included Billy Smith in this photo from 1982 by David Sensat. This is that exact spot in the dining room today. In 1982, just before the house opened as a museum, the Australian Don Lane Show visited and explored the house a bit. I actually did a reaction video to his visit because there is so much to notice, and you can check out that in the link that popped up here, or it's also in the description box. In one scene, Don goes into the kitchen and speaks with cook Mary Jenkins. They are standing in front of the stove. Here is that very spot. The camera then pans to the sink area. Now here is that spot today. There are some cool things to see in the basement, so let's head down there. When the house first opened, fans could spot a yellow beanbag chair near the fireplace. Maybe this belonged to Lisa Marie. It appears that maybe the paint was peeling from the brick floor of the fireplace. Now here is a look at the room today. Pretty much exactly the same. If we go across the hall to the pool table room, this organ was in the corner just inside the door in the early days along with hanging art. I'm sure fans would touch it, so this was removed from the space a long time ago. Today, there is nothing by that corner that we walk by. So when we walk up the green shag staircase, it looks like this. Then when we reach the top and turn around, it looks a lot like this. Notice the stair railing on either side? Another still from the Don Lane Show episode. This is that same staircase from 1982, and it didn't yet have a railing for fan safety. Also down there was this dry potted tree in a white basket. These days, that crispy tree can be found in the breezeway in between the house and the trophy building. There are a couple cool things to point out once we reach the top of that green shag staircase in the jungle room. Taken by a fan in the early 80s is this Elvis souvenir style hanging art near the staircase. I don't think this belonged to Elvis, but instead added during filming for the movie This Is Elvis, filmed inside this room in 1981. Here is my photo of that spot today. No Aloha from Hawaii art, but the nail that held it still remains. Have you seen Priscilla's tour of Graceland from 1984? It shows areas fans get to tour, and it's a great peek at the house closer to the time that Elvis lived there. Here's a still from the jungle room showing a ship painting on the back wall. You might recognize this fan gift. It's currently hanging in the hallway outside the pool table room next to the laundry room. For decades, or at least as long as I've been going, it's been this brown feathered mirror in that spot in the jungle room, hung horizontally, similar to how it was in the mid-70s when it was hung vertically. Now let's talk about a huge change that was made to this room just for fans. Here is a clear shot of the room facing the waterfall taken in the early 80s. While some of the things are moved around, the major change between Elvis's jungle room and the tour is a large window cut into the left wall. Since fans can't walk into the room, it was created so you can look out at the room when you're walking by. Let's look at another still from This Is Elvis. Here are the actors playing Elvis and Ginger walking through the jungle room to the kitchen. You can see a bit of what was there maybe in Elvis's time, but are a bit different today. Mainly what's hanging on the walls and the chairs around the kitchen counter. The yellow art hanging on the left was covering this electrical panel in the kitchen, but it's practically exactly the same overall. We have some cool things to check out outside, so let's go. Starting with the carport where Elvis kept his classic cars. It's kind of hard for a lot of us to imagine the cars just sitting outside the house, but the car museum didn't open until 1989. Here's musician Glenn Danzig posing in the carport in 1984. We'll see more from him in a minute. Here is how we see the carport these days. It's an empty, shady spot that we walk through. Here's a cute pic of Aunt Delta and Edmund. Look at that dog. They're snuggling on a bench outside the jungle room. See the covered walkway to the left and then the metal siding in the background? Here's another of them in that spot in the patio area behind the house. Now here is that spot today. They were under that awning, and there's that covered walkway and the metal wall beyond. Here's a fun little then and now just outside the smokehouse. Here's another still from the 1982 Don Lane episode. On the left is an associate of the show, speaking with Elvis's Uncle Earl on the right. Earl Pritchett was Elvis's uncle by marriage. He was married to Minnie Mae's daughter, Nash. You can see the smokehouse there in the back and some stuff stacked beside it. Now here is that spot today. I'm pretty sure that cutie is Blue-Eyed Bandit, standing where they were. And now there's an employee lounge behind the smokehouse. Once we walk into the trophy building, straight ahead is the Hall of Gold. Here is what that spot looked like in the 80s. You might notice something interesting at the back of the hallway. We typically walk right past this end of the hall and it's usually covered with a curtain, but on this day it was open. There's a door there with steps that lead to the short covered walkway to the double doors of the music room back inside the house. There's also, interestingly, a brick ledge along the right side of the hallway. I'm sure that became a trip hazard because today that brick ledge is no longer, and there's that doorway we just saw, always cloaked with a curtain. Now let's look all around one area inside the main exhibit space and how it looked in the 1980s compared to now. Here's a nice color photo from the 70s, actually shows how Elvis had it. It was also an exhibit space for his achievements and mementos. See all the awards lining the wall? I mean, obviously. Here's Aunt Delta in there. It's a little blurry, but I can tell exactly where she's standing. Same spot as Jerry Schilling here in 1981. He's wearing a This Is Elvis pin, standing in front of all those exact awards. And then here's a broader view from the back of the room showing the whole space. Delta and Jerry were standing on the right side of this photo. So obviously this isn't how it looks today. Here's a quick still of the room in transformation during the filming of the Don Lane episode, getting ready for fans. They're installing that railing that goes around the middle of the room. Now here's Tom Jones touring at his friend's house, admiring all those gold records. The room has transformed to house all the artifacts in the middle of the railing. Now here is a look at that exact spot that Tom Jones was standing. The gold records are now on display in the complex across the street, and there's climate-controlled cases in the middle for the artifacts. Looking at the back wall, here's some kids checking out the Aloha from Hawaii suit in 1982. Now here is the same look at that angle. The room has gotten a modern upgrade. Let's keep going. Here's a better look at some of the artifacts on display in the middle of the room with guitars hanging from the ceiling. It's interesting to see how things were displayed back then, but you can only do as good as you know how to do. This was just a few years after Elvis's passing, and they were trying to showcase his things. Lastly, a similar angle today, where even furniture is kept behind glass, temperature controlled. Once we exit the trophy building, we're at the pool area, so let's talk about that. Here's a photo from a fan touring the house in 1982. This area was being transformed from the pool house, or trophy room bathroom area, to a separate on-site public bathrooms for guests. If you're interested, I created a video all about what fans call the pool house. You can check that out up here. Now here is that exact spot today. The staircase on the left is where fans exit the trophy building. Straight ahead is the back side of the public bathrooms, which are accessed on the other side of this wall. We're taking our tour to the pasture to check out the barn. Let's actually look at a photo of Elvis first. Here he is atop rising sun outside the barn in the 1960s in this grassy area. Notice that equipment with a white top and a red on the bottom? There's also a small white structure in front of it. Here's a photo from 1982 of some of Elvis's horses in that same area. We can get a better look at that old piece of equipment and the structure in front of it. And another photo of rising sun in that same spot in the grass. These days, that area is all paved with a new outbuilding and more upkeep on the barn, which is original to the house from 1939. If you're interested in learning more about the horses, I created a video called Presley Pets that includes more in-depth history on the horses. You can check that out up here. Let's get a little closer to the barn. Here are a couple more Ron Galella photos from 1982 of Priscilla at the barn entrance with, I think that's rising sun. The barn looks well used with a dirt floor and has tons of cobwebs. See the cabinet in the back with 2 doors? Now here's a photo from a few years ago, and the barn had a huge renovation while keeping the same layout. See the cabinet in the very back? Here's an interesting fun fact. Here's another still from the 1982 episode of The Don Lane Show of Elvis's Uncle Earl in the pasture with some pets. That might be Edmund. See the antique farming equipment near the fence? That was at Graceland when Elvis moved in and he kept it. Today, it's still at Graceland. I took this picture a year ago. This is at the back of the left side of the property right outside the archives building, and it's still just sitting there. But let's go back to the other side of the property near the meditation garden. Here are 3 of Minnie Mae's kids, Elvis's Aunt Nash, Uncle Vester, and Aunt Delta. I think they're sitting near the old well that has a small covering, and if they are, that's right here. Here's musician Danzig again at Elvis's grave. In 2020, he released an album of Elvis covers titled Danzig Sings Elvis that contains mostly 50s songs. Here's a broader view of the 4 graves in the 1980s, where there was only a small chain surrounding them. Now a photo more recent with the wrought iron fence in its place, and of course the addition of Lisa Marie and her son Ben joining their family. Like we talked about before, Graceland's car museum didn't exist until 1989. Here's a brochure of what fans received when it was added to the tour. Until about 2017, that building looked like this, right across the street from the mansion on the far left of the complex. Today it still stands, but now it's a private building on the complex. Here's the inside when that was the car museum. The cars were on display on a little path that looked like it was outside. The new car museum is super modern with the cars showcased 360 degrees. Lastly, let's talk about a dream from the 1980s that finally came to fruition. I came across this edition of Graceland Express from 1986. It was a publication that Graceland put out with updates and fun facts about Graceland. In this one, it outlined a vision for a Graceland hotel and how the guest experience will be. It specifically details how it will have a southern mansion feel and be a place for fans to get together and congregate. That plan deviated a bit when they purchased a former Wilson World hotel right across the street and renaming it Heartbreak Hotel. That opened in 1999 and became that central spot for fans to hang out. Then in 2016, the guest house at Graceland opened. It's quite a bit larger than the original plan from the 1980s, but it has a similar look. Outside, it has the southern charm of Graceland itself and is still the place for fans to congregate. And that is it. Did you learn anything new? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.